Hello, friends. UFC 300 is just around the corner. I bugged out with the picks. These are all for your pleasure. I have tried to put in something new for your enjoyment for this video specifically. Hopefully, I can start introducing some of these elements with more frequency in the pick videos. And I always say it, but you can expect more content soon. So please enjoy. We're only picking favorites. It's over. You said you would make original picks as long as people are watching. They're still watching. They've died watching. The picks. Is there no other way for us to get some underdogs or some hot takes? Is there no other way? We can bet on some fighters being the best version of themselves. But we can't rely on that. The fighters are too technical. Send word to the viewers that we're picking underdogs right now, and quickly. So many flukes. What can men do against such reckless variance? Pick Cody Garbrandt. Pick Cody to beat Figgy. For a juicy parlay. For the channel. For your viewers.
The sun is rising.
Look to my coming at first light on the fifth day. At dawn.
Look to the boys.
Yes. Yes.
The Cody Garbrandt pick shall be made on the channel.
One last time. Yes!
You heard it right. We're going with this fucking man, Cody Garbrandt! Cody Garbrandt crazy, man. We're going Cody Garbrandt crazy, okay? My initial pick, my instinctual pick, was, of course, Deiveson Figueiredo, the god of war, Kratos, some might say. I will get into the physical stats and all of that stuff in a moment, but just kind of for vibes and feelings surrounding this fight, I really was... My brain screams Figueiredo, honestly. But Cody, man. I'm riding with Cody, honestly. Brian Kelleher wasn't the biggest hill to climb, so to speak. No disrespect to Brian Kelleher or to Cody Garbrandt by extension. But I'm riding with the version of Cody Garbrandt that we saw versus Dominic Cruz, versus great... Even, scratch the Dominic Cruz fight. Even in fights where Cody Garbrandt earned the Cody Garbrandt crazy moniker, flashes of brilliance. You can't deny that at points. Flashes of brilliance. The boxing is there. I do think that Cody Garbrandt has a legitimate chance to finish Figueiredo by KO TKO. Round, IDK. I do not know. I have no clue what round it could be. Now we'll go on to stats, and I will break things down a little bit further with a little bit more intricacy. Deiveson Figueiredo is coming into this fight at 36 years old. He stands 5'5" with a 68-inch reach, matched up with Cody Garbrandt, who is 4 years younger at 32 years old, standing 5'8" tall with a 65.5-inch reach. This fight is taking place in the bantamweight division, which Deiveson Figueiredo has moved up to from the flyweight division. Deiveson Figueiredo has a record of 22-3-1 draw as a professional MMA fighter. 11 of those 22 wins, all 3 of his losses, and the singular draw took place in the UFC. Cody Garbrandt has a 14-5 professional record, 9-5 in the UFC. Now, start off with Figueiredo. Really, my initial pick for why I was leaning Figueiredo, why my instincts say Figueiredo and my brain says Figueiredo, honestly, but is because Figueiredo is a deadly, almost vicious fighter. He really is. Like, granted, he has gone beam. We've seen him we've seen him beaten multiple times, but he's still extremely dangerous. Getting a little old, though. 36, getting a little old. I'll say he hasn't looked too bad, like, really. Beat Rob Font calmly. He is an extremely dangerous fighter, and even though I'm backing Cody, I think that this is ultimately a favorable matchup for Deiveson Figueiredo. Just the way that these guys fight, I think it's a favorable matchup for Deiveson Figueiredo. I'm really relying on Cody Garbrandt to not only find the chin of Deiveson, but literally go Cody Garbrandt crazy. Duck in, hit a little combo, maybe just a monstrous hook. I'm expecting head movement. I am expecting the Dominic Cruz performance. I'm expecting a Cody Garbrandt that we really have only seen once before, if at all. That might be too much to ask for. It might be. There's a point I want to make kind of about UFC 300 as a whole. I feel like anyone that's making picks for UFC 300, like, it's weird, man. I used to think that picking extremely high-profile fights, it was kind of easier in a sense because there's a lot more vetting of either competitors' careers. You know, we've seen enough, at least, to where they're recognized and they're known. But so what I was actually thinking of here, it's hilarious that I lost my train of thought, but what I was actually thinking of here was going back to how it's easier to predict. I thought it was easier to predict higher profile fights based on the amount of information that we have available to us. In reality, no. Hell no. I don't know why it took me so long to like switch up on that, but yeah, really cannot remember that train of thought, so that's what I was thinking here. Nothing too crazy. I think Cody just has... Back to the video. Cody, without a doubt, has the potential to finish this fight himself in the first or second round, legitimately just by the virtue of his hands, his boxing alone. Despite the knockouts, Cody Garbrandt has gone from one of the worst downswings or skids you could say in the sport to actually recovering, and he's already salvaged his career. It's not destroyed, you know? And despite the knockouts, as a point that I wanted to make earlier, despite the knockouts, he, as in Cody Garbrandt, does have decent or even good head movement. Really, he does. It's just when you play the head movement game, you have to realize what you're gambling with. Like, if it doesn't work out, you're going to get rocked, and probably harder than you would have initially got rocked. So that's always the trade-off, and sometimes that's happened. Sometimes Cody Garbrandt has gone Cody Garbrandt crazy, hence the name. Like, he's just bugged out, bit down, and tried to go to war, and it hasn't worked out. My meowing buff. First pick, Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt, big underdog in this fight. I don't think the odds are necessarily wide, but we'll ride with Cody Garbrandt. I'm riding with Cody Garbrandt. I think the horn of Cody Garbrandt will sound in the deep one last time. That's what I said for the Brian Kelleher fight. It wasn't as serious, but also, like, you have to understand, this man, Cody No Love, was a lot more in doubt still, even at that point. Even to me. I'm not, like, it was kind of a confident pick to pick Cody against Brian Kelleher, but still, like, it was still, people wanted to see, you know, we were interested. Some more statements, some more thoughts on the Cody Garbrandt versus Deiveson Figueiredo fight. Also realized I didn't list off these stats, too. Cody Garbrandt has 11 wins and 4 losses by KO TKO. 6 of those wins and all 4 of those losses took place in the UFC. Like I was saying, though, it's tough. Some of them were because he got knocked out brutally. All of them were, actually, kind of. But some of them were instigated or initiated by Cody Garbrandt going crazy. That has to be kept in mind. He might even go crazy in this fight. Who knows? I want him to go crazy a bit, just in the best way. No submissions on his record at all. On his professional record, 3-1 when it comes to decisions, and they all took place in the UFC. That is Cody Garbrandt. Deiveson Figueiredo, on the other hand, has 9 wins and 1 loss by KO TKO. 4 of those wins and the single loss taking place in the UFC. 8-1 when it comes to submissions. 3-1 in the UFC. 5-1 when it comes to decisions. 4 of those 5, and the only loss by decision taking place in the UFC. He was the former, this is Deiveson Figueiredo, the former UFC flyweight champion. from January 22nd of 2022 to January 21st of 2023. Bit interesting. Off by a day, almost a year. Then moved up to bantamweight, obviously. He's 1-0 at bantamweight, like I mentioned earlier. He has a win over Rob Font. Extremely dangerous, dynamic striker, deceptive power. All on paper, these are things that would make you want to pick Deiveson Figueiredo. Ultimately, I'm going with Cody. 3-1 decisions, all UFC, as I said. He salvaged his career, man. He salvaged it, for real. He is a skilled and powerful boxer. Susceptible to bouts of madness. That's what I do have written down in my notes. But he does have tremendous heart. He was also the former UFC bantamweight champion of the world from December 30th, 2016 to November the 4th of 2017. And my final note really on Cody is ultimately it depends on what version, on what form Cody is in when this fight goes on, you know? And I know that's kind of a cop-out thing to say, but I have faith. This is a big underdog pick because if the fight plays out how logic would dictate, and do not get it twisted, I don't think that Cody Garbrandt maybe even wins this fight. Like if they fought 10 times, I don't think Cody Garbrandt wins more than Deiveson. But I like my chances. I like Cody's chances, I should say. Moving on. The Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. A veteran fight between 37-year-old Bobby Green and 40-year-old Jim Miller. Both of these men have close to, if not over 50 fights in their professional careers. I'll start off with Bobby Green. The pick is going to be Jim Miller, but I will start off with Bobby Green. Bobby. I love Bobby, honestly. Bobby Green, like I said, is coming into this fight at 37 years old. He stands 5'10" with a 71-inch reach. Matched up to Jim Miller, who is 40 years old, 5'8" tall with a 71-inch reach as well. Bobby has a professional record of 31 wins, 15 losses, and a single draw. 12 of those 31 wins, 10 of those 15 losses, and the single draw took place in the UFC, as well as one no contest. Back to Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Gave off the physical stats. Bobby Green has 11 wins and 5 losses by KO TKO. 3 of those wins and 4 of those losses coming in the UFC. His last fight ended in a brutal knockout at the hands of Jalen Turner. In what was one of... No, I don't want to say what was one of... But in what was a horrible stoppage that I think we will see has changed Bobby Green's career. I don't know. And there's a possibility that Bobby Green comes out and... Jesus, man. Like, flashbacks to fucking Bobby Green versus Grant Dawson. Like, not specifically for Jim Miller. Not to say anything like that. It's just like... I've counted out Bobby a couple times. He has proved me wrong. I've also backed him a couple times, and he's just shit the bed completely, so it's tough with that. 11-5 KO TKO, 3-4 in the UFC. As I said, 9-2 when it comes to submissions, picking up a juicy one somewhat recently over Tony Ferguson. 2 of those took place in the UFC. 11-8 when it comes to decisions, 7-6 in the UFC. He is a legitimately elusive and unique fighter. There is no two ways to say it. Bobby Green has a very distinct style. He is very entertaining to watch. If he has the opportunity to, he will set the tone of the fight and stay fleeing and touching up his opponent and ride it out to a decision. Or he finds just that one moment and exploits a massive, massive gap in either, whether it be like diligence, like not paying attention to like a heavy strike coming in, or they just legitimately get caught by a heavy strike coming in, and then he can somehow work a finish out of that. It depends. He is a dangerous fighter. You know, he's a very skilled fighter, for real. He can, however, due to the very nature of his style, be caught and punished bad. Kind of what happened to Jalen Turner with Jalen Turner. Jalen Turner caught Bobby Green trying to weave out of it and finished him brutally. He does have a good understanding of range, and I think he could eke out a decision. I don't really see Bobby Green maybe finishing Jim Miller, but hey, who knows, man? And you know, like on this card, I really feel like there are no locks. whatsoever. There can't be a lock. Closest locks that you can maybe get to are like Bo Nickel and Weili Zhang, and those even are like up for debate, really. Like Bo Nickel, maybe not so much, but like you could just tell me that you have a feeling Cody Brundage. You could say Cody Brundage by slam KO again, like, and maybe not fair enough, but I'd listen to what you have to say. Like, seriously, I would. Like, I do think that he will get murked, but we will get to that when we get to that. Jim Miller, on the other hand, 7 wins by KO TKO, 2 losses. 6 of those wins and 2 of those losses taking place in the UFC. 20-3 when it comes to submissions. 12-3 in the UFC. 10-12 when it comes to decisions. 8 of those 10 wins and 11 of those 12 losses took place in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight win and finish streak. Impressive at 40 years old. And this is possibly his last fight. I think that Jim Miller will honestly find a submission, if not the knockout. A decision might. I don't know if the decision necessarily favors Bobby. But maybe it does, because I don't see it going to a decision like Jim Miller holds him down on the ground or anything. Like, I struggle to see it going to a decision where Bobby wins. Not struggle crazily, but I think it's unlikely. And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm tweaked out. But we'll have to see. Jim Miller is the pick. We move on to a women's strawweight bout. Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. Marina Rodriguez is the pick. She's coming into this fight at 36 years old, 5'6", 65-inch reach. Jessica Andrade is 32 years old, 5'1", with a 62-inch reach. If I said 62 for Marina Rodriguez, that was a mistake. It should be 65. I think I said 65. But 62-inch reach for Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade has a 25-12 professional record. 16 of those 25 wins and 10 of those 12 losses took place in the UFC. Now, a couple of fighters on this card have faced each other. You know, that's not uncommon. That's actually, yeah, it's not uncommon in the UFC. That happens all the time, you know. I really don't even say that to make any kind of point, but I will maybe bring this up for later fights, specifically Weili Zhang versus Yan Xiaonan. But Jessica Andrade, we know Jessica Andrade, right? Spooky power, or used to have spooky power, we should say. No more roids. Gotten finished brutally a couple times here and there. But we will look over the stats of victory and such, actually, before we get into too much conjecture. 10-5 when it comes to KO/TKO. 6 of those 10 wins and 4 of those 5 KO/TKO wins and losses taking place in the UFC. 8-4 when it comes to submissions. 3-4 in the UFC. 7-3 when it comes to decisions. 7-2 in the UFC. She's 2-3 in her last 5 fights. All of those 3 losses were by finish. I personally think that Jessica Andrade is getting pushed towards the edge of having a career, if you get what I'm saying. I think she's almost done. Maybe not. Maybe not. She is the former UFC strawweight champion. She was, at least from May 11th, 2019 to July 31st of 2019. Didn't see where I wrote it for a second. Marina Rodriguez, on the other hand, is coming into this fight with a 17-win, 3-loss, and 2-draw professional record. 7 of those wins, 3 of those losses, and both draws took place in the UFC. She has 7 wins by KO/TKO and 1 loss. The single loss and 2 of those KO/TKOs took place in the UFC. She also picked up another one on the Contender Series to get into the UFC. 1 win by submission, 9-2 when it comes to decisions, 5-2 in the UFC. I think Marina Rodriguez has fought good competition. Like, later on, she has fought Yan Xiaonan, and she beat Yan Xiaonan. I think as of right now, even though there's an age gap, she looks better to me right now than Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade, possibly the beginning of the end. It might even be deeper into that than I thought, but We move on. Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. Money, Moicano. Moicano won money. Oh, God. A rough and spooky fight to pick. A very rough and spooky fight to pick. But I'm going with Renato Moicano. Again, my instinctual pick, Jalen Turner. When I think of I'll save the conjecture, of course. Jalen Turner coming into this fight, the younger man, notably younger man, at 28 years old, standing at a proud 6'3", with a 75.5-inch reach. Renato Moicano, notably older, 34 years old. Not a small guy at 5'11", with a 72-inch reach. Jalen Turner has a 14-7 professional record. He is 7-4 in the UFC. Renato Moicano has an 18-5 record with one draw. He is 10-5 in the UFC. I think kind of recent, I don't want to say hype, but momentum. Definitely, I think age plays a part in it, and activity, has all kind of maybe swayed public opinion of Jalen Turner. Now, Jalen Turner is a very decent, he's a good fighter. He's a great striker, a very powerful striker, blessed physically. However, we have seen him struggle with grappling, even with compromised opponents. It's very tough. Renato Moicano, despite the weakness in the stand-up, he makes it work. And he legitimately attacks for submissions, which is very important. A lot of people, they'll take the takedown, they'll take the control, they'll try to do a little bit of damage, they'll take a submission if it's presented to them. But Renato's actually attacking on the ground. That's the best part about him. Renato Moicano has a 0-3 KO/TKO record, or I should say winning method, winning trend. All three of those KO/TKO losses took place in the UFC. He's 10-1, however, when it comes to submissions. 6 of those 10 submissions and the 1 submission loss took place in the UFC. 8-1 when it comes to decisions. 4-1 in the UFC. Jalen Turner, on the other hand, has 10 wins and 3 losses by KO/TKO. He is 4-1 in the UFC. He also picked up another KO/TKO on Dana White Contender Series. He has 4 submission wins, but I don't think that will help really against someone like Renato Moicano. It'll obviously help, but I don't think it'll be the difference. He has 4 losses by decision. 3 of those took place in the UFC. Jalen Turner has. I've doubted Jalen multiple times. I have this written down in my notes. I've doubted Jalen multiple times, and he has almost always proved me wrong. Now, as I said, though, it was never a scenario like this, except for one time, except for versus Dan Hooker. That time he actually did prove me wrong because I backed him. Hey, that was my mistake. That was my mistake. He's big for the weight class. He has a good understanding of range, Jalen Turner does. He, like I said before, he does struggle a bit against grapplers, and if you struggle a bit against grapplers, Renato Moicano, I think, finishes you. He just finishes you. I think that Renato Moicano, despite the whole on paper and through just the eye test, in his striking defense, to be precise, I think he can survive, though. I think it'll be fine, honestly. Fine might be being very generous, but I think he can survive. I think Renato can survive. Very slick grappler. He does take notable damage and does get hit with powerful shots. I think he can avoid getting finished, though, by striking. That's another thing. He avoids getting finished, though. Not avoids getting finished, obviously. He has 3 losses by KO/TKO. But, recently, I picked Drew Dober to beat Renato Moicano. I don't think that was a bad pick at all, honestly. It was tough. Renato proved me wrong crazy there, though. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I'm going with Renato Moicano. Moicano want money. We move on to a featherweight bout. Sodiq Yusuff versus Diego Lopes. Now, kind of fuck with Sodiq Yusuff. Not going to lie. The biggest Problem is that he's fought lesser competition. That's actually the worst thing I think about Sadiq Yusuff. I don't think Sadiq Yusuff is bad at anything in particular. Sadiq Yusuff is coming into this fight at 30 years old, 5'9", with a 71-inch reach. Diego Lopes is 1 year younger at 5'11". I said at 5'11". At 29 years old, he stands 5'11" with a 72.5-inch reach. Sadiq has a 13-3 professional record, 6 wins and 2 losses in the UFC. Diego has a 23-6 record, doubling him up, or almost doubling him up, on both sides. 2 of those wins and 1 of those losses took place in the UFC. So Sadiq does have roughly half the experience overall of Diego, but he does have a notable amount of UFC experience, especially over someone with only 3 UFC fights. That I don't think will matter necessarily. I think Diego is going to come in like a bat out of hell and get a finish. I think he's going to brute force a finish. I don't think that it maybe will be necessarily brutal, but he's going to brute force it. He might take massive damage himself. This is a legitimate test for both Sadiq Yusuff and Diego. Like, it is, straight up. Diego at 29 years old, he is kind of a promising prospect. He's fought decent comp, and he has really good momentum coming into this fight. Sadiq Yusuff, breaking down his record a little bit more, he's 6-1 when it comes to KO TKOs. He picked up 2 KO TKO victories in the UFC. He has 1 submission win that took place in the UFC. He is 6-2 when it comes to decisions. He picked up a decision on Dana White Contender Series, and he is 3-2 in the UFC other than that. Diego, on the other hand, is 9-2 when it comes to KO TKOs. He picked up 1 in the UFC. He has 14 wins by submission. Very notable. 14 wins by submission to someone's 1 win by submission. Now, on paper, that is just massive. It's just massive. You don't really have to do more than that to see that. You could say, well, who is that against? Fair enough. I refer back to, I forget this dude's name. I want to say it was Bogdan something versus Zach Pauga. Now, I picked Zach Pauga in that fight. Some people could call me crazy. Please listen. I thought that Bogdan legitimately is one of the best examples of having a padded record in modern MMA. But I did concede the fact in my pick video that even if you are farming straight cans, bums, taxi drivers, plumbers, you name it, there gets to a certain point where it's just muscle memory, and the experience does stack up. It stacks up. Maybe not as much or as quickly as against like actual valid competition, but it still does stack up, and he ended up KOing Zach Pauga. So, going back to Diego does have a lot of experience. He has a lot of experience. He's a prolific finisher as well. Coming in with good momentum, I got Diego, man. He looked like a force to be reckoned with in his last fight, despite maybe having a hiccup. But it's fine, honestly. Moving on to a fight that I'm not going to take too much time on. This is Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison. Holly Holm is 42 years old, the preacher's daughter coming into this fight. 5'8", 69-inch reach. Kayla Harrison, 9 years younger at 33 years old. 5'8", 66-inch reach. Now, Holly Holm has massive, massive accreditations to her name in multiple combat sports, including MMA. She was the former UFC bantamweight champion from November 4th of 2015 to March 5th of 2016. Her highlight of her career would be the historic performance against Ronda Rousey, where she didn't retire her, but she set her down that path. Gave her a good push down that path. Father Time is undefeated. She is 42 years old. She fights like she's 42 years old. She was brutally subbed by Mayra Bueno Silva, even though she was roided up during that fight. That's what I'm jacking, and I think that's what the case was. Kayla Harrison, on the other hand, coming into this fight much younger. She's making her UFC debut. She was in PFL for most of her career. Holly Holm has a 15-6. I'm cutting back real quick, I know. Holly Holm has a 15-6 professional record. 8 of those 15 wins, 6 all 6 of those losses took place in the UFC, as well as a no contest, which I believe is the Mayra Bueno Silva fight. Kayla Harrison, on the other hand, has a 16-1 career. And 15 of those 16 wins, and the only loss took place in PFL. I'm going to be listing off a lot of PFL stats for Kayla Harrison, obviously, because that's all we have. And at least the benefit to that is that she was in the PFL for the overwhelming majority of her career. So we can take from that sample size, you know. And 16 fights that's decent enough. I'll take that. I really will take that. Like I said, 16-1. 6 of those 16 wins have come by way of KO/TKO. 5 of them were in the PFL for Kayla Harrison. 6 wins by submission, all 6 in the PFL. 4-1 when it comes to decisions. Again, all of those took place in the PFL. She still There's a couple branching explanations that you can make off of this. Ultimately, this comes down to age and just the circle of life for fighting. Like, Kayla Harrison still has she still has a career left, essentially. You know, she still has a bit of a career. There's another chapter to the career here that she can write. Holly Holm, we've seen everything, pretty much. We really have. We've seen everything. Now, watch Holly Holm come out and head kick fucking Kayla Harrison, KO her out cold, but I doubt it, man. I highly doubt it. I honestly think Kayla Harrison takes down Holly Holm and ground and pound KO/TKOs her. That's what I think happens in this fight. Moving on, not too much to be said other than that. I just want to make sure I didn't skip anything else. Obviously, I will mention also Kayla Harrison, 2-time women's judo Olympic gold medalist at the 2012 London and 2016 Rio Games. She started MMA around 2016. That's the last I'll mention about that. Moving on to kind of a spooky fight for me. Calvin Kattar, a featherweight fight, which is Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling. I'm going with Aljamain Sterling, but I'm scared. I'm very scared. My initial pick was also Aljamain Sterling. I'll really give the main reason why I'm scared, and it's going to be the majority of the talking on this pick, but Calvin Kattar's coming into this fight at a notable 36 years old. He stands 5'11", 72-inch reach. Aljamain, 2 years younger at 34 years old, 5'7" with a 71-inch reach. Calvin Kattar has a 23-7 professional record, 7 of those 23 wins and 5 of those 7 losses taking place in the UFC. Aljamain, on the other hand, has a 23-4 professional record, 15 of those 23 wins and all 4 of those losses took place in the UFC. Calvin Kattar is a dangerous striker, a very dangerous boxer, a very dangerous counterpuncher. He has 10 wins and 1 loss by KO/TKO. The 1 loss could kind of be like an asterisk loss too, because it was due to an injury, or an injury contributed to it, you could say. He's 3-1 when it comes to submission, but none of them took place in the UFC. 10-5 when it comes to decisions, 3-4 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight skid, obviously that includes his most recent bout, which was the injury. He has also had a 2-year layoff, however, in between his most recent bout and to the present day, and to what will be his next bout. I think Calvin Kattar is a dangerous fighter. He's dangerous enough to finish this fight, to rock Aljamain Sterling and put him out badly with his hands. But I think more likely than not, Aljamain either submits him or he can just grind him out to a decision somewhat. Maybe not grind him out like really boring, grind him the fuck out, but he wins a decision. Aljamain wins decisions, man. He does. Aljamain, on the other hand, has 3 wins and 2 losses by KO/TKO. He is 2-2 in the UFC when it comes to that. 8 wins by submission, picked up 4 of them in the UFC. 11-12 when it 11-2 when it comes to decisions. 8-2 in the UFC. 1 win by disqualification, obviously Petr Yan. That was horrifying. I can really only pray. This is my note, and this is the main point I wanted to make. I can only pray that since the Sean O'Malley fight, Aljamain is not like permanently changed or altered or adulterated, if you will, in some way. I can only hope. If he's not, I think he handily wins. I'm terrified that if that is the case, though. He last fought at bantamweight. He was the former UFC bantamweight champion from October the 22nd of 2022 to July 19th of 2023. Moving on, honestly. This will be another one of these segments that I present for your viewing pleasure. Enjoy.
In the Czech Republic, too, we love pork. Ever had our sausages? In the Czech Republic, too, we love pork. You ever had our sausages?
Adriana.
In the Czech Republic, too, we love pork. Ever had our sausages?
Yuri Prohaska. A lot of people are just counting out Yuri Prohaska. For whatever reason, I do not see Alexander Rakic winning this fight. We will break it down in a moment. Just get hyped, man. Yuri Prohaska is coming into this fight at 31 years old. He stands 6'3" with an 80-inch reach. Alexander Rakic, on the other hand, he's 32 years old, stands 6'4", he is 1 inch taller with a 78-inch reach. There's a 2-inch reach advantage for Yuri. Yuri has a 29-win, 4-loss, and 1 draw professional record. 3 of those wins and 1 loss, and 1 loss took place in the UFC. Alexander Rakic, on the other hand, has a 14-3 professional record. 6 of those wins and 2 of those losses took place in the UFC. He is 9-1 when it comes to KO TKOs. 2 of those wins and the only loss taking place in the UFC. 1-1 when it comes to submissions. 4-1 when it comes to decisions, which all took place in the UFC. His last fight, Alexander Rakic, was in mid-2022, and he himself, similar to the last bout with Calvin Kattar, is coming off of a leg injury. He does have a few decent wins, actually not even. He has a good win and a few other decent wins against decent and good competition. Granted, Jimmy Manuwa was already... we're not even going to talk about that. Let's go back to Yuri. Yuri's the pick, obviously. Yuri's a prolific finisher, despite having the hiccup, the little bump in the road, running into Alex Pereira. At the time, everyone was like, early stoppage. He said that he was out. But hey, that's neither here nor there. Yuri Prohaska, prolific finisher. I have to read off to you these stats. Out of his 29 wins and 4 losses, 25 of those 29 wins and 3 of those losses have been by way of KO TKO. He is 2-1 in the UFC when it comes to that method as well. 3 wins and 1 loss by submission. He has 1 submission win in the UFC. He only has 1 decision win, and that is the only time in his career that he has ever went the distance, and that was in Rizin. He's a prolific finisher with literally an approximately 97% finish rate. He has finished 28 of his 29 wins. Let that sink in. Now, the quality of those wins against the opponents in Rizin varies a bit, but it's not horrible. I almost said something that would probably get me canceled, so I'm not going to say it. There is maybe something to be said about questioning Yuri's chin. I think a lot of people are counting him out. You are only as good as your last fight, but I think Yuri gets this one done. I think he bum rushes and runs over Alexander Rakic in the first round, boss. That's just how I see this one. I see it happening. Calmly. We move on to a middleweight bout that I will not be spending a lot of time on either. Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage. Bo Nickel's coming into this fight at 28 years old, 6'1", 76-inch reach. Cody Brundage, a year older, at 29 years old, 6 feet tall, and a 72-inch reach. Now, Bo Nickel is 5-0. 2 of those 5 wins he picked up in the UFC. Another 2 he picked up on Dana White Contender Series. Yes, you heard that correctly, or you would be inferring that correctly. He got his Contender Series nod you could say, when he only had one professional fight in his MMA career. This kid is a wrestling prodigy. He is groomed for the UFC. The UFC is currently grooming him. That's what they're doing actively now. They are protecting him slightly. Not crazily, though. This is a way bigger step up than Val Woodburn. I want to be the guy that picks Cody Brundage, and for Cody Brundage to have possibly the most historic fraud check moment in UFC history, where he fraud checks Bo Nickel. The UFC's like, that's the golden calf of the fucking UFC. They're trying to raise that motherfucker. They're worshiping him beyond closed doors, all that stuff. The problem with wanting to pick Cody Brundage and picking Cody Brundage, if you're thinking about that, is what has he shown us, really, man? Like, we have to come back to reality. Just come back down to reality. Bo Nickel, like I said, wrestling prodigy, phenom. He's earned his stripes in that regard. Cody Brundage, also a wrestler, low-key, hasn't sniffed anywhere near the level of success that Bo Nickel has, legitimately. Cody Brundage is 10-5, 4-4 in the UFC, as I said. He is 5-2 when it comes to KO, TKO. He picked up 2 of those wins and 1 loss in the UFC. 3-1 when it comes to submissions. 1-1 in the UFC. 1-2 when it comes to decisions. And he only has 2 decision losses in the UFC. He also has a DQ win. He also has one of the 14 slam KOs in UFC history. If you remember it was actually a bit queer. It came immediately after the 13th slam knockout in UFC history from Drakkar Klose, I believe. I'm pretty sure it was Drakkar Klose. I just don't remember his opponent. I'm going Bo Nickel, though. You got to go Bo Nickel. I want to pick Cody Brundage. It'd be cool if he won. It'd just be cool. I don't think you can pick Cody Brundage in good faith unless maybe you have some kind of insider knowledge, really. Moving on to Charles do Bronx Oliveira versus Arman Sarukian. Oh boy. Oh, woo lad. That's woo lad. I've switched a couple times back and forth between these lads. My initial pick, my instinctual pick, was Arman Sarukian, but I have switched over to Charles Oliveira, man. The dog, man. Oh, the dog. A bit to say about this fight. So Charles Oliveira coming into this fight at 34 years old, stands 5'10", 74-inch reach. Arman is 7 years younger at 27 years old, 5'7" inches tall, and 72.5-inch reach. Charles has a veterans record at 34-9, 22 of those 34 wins taking place in the UFC, all 9 of his losses in the UFC, as well as 1 no contest. Charles does have KO TKOs. He has 10 wins and 4 losses by KO TKO. 4-4 in the UFC. That 4 KO TKO loss is scary, but it's okay. We can live with it. 21-4 when it comes to submissions. 16 of those 21 submission victories and all 4 of the losses taking place in the UFC. It is notable to mention, or it's just notable, the opponents who were able to submit him were not your average Joes. We're talking about people like Khabib. We're talking about the best of the best here when it comes to actually submitting people, okay? Talking about people like Islam, those types, that caliber of grappler. The former 2-time UFC lightweight champion with 1 successful defense. You could say a bit chinny. He's a legendary fighter type shit. You can put it up however you want to. He is a lethal grappler. He is a submission magician. And he has heart. Charles Oliveira has heart. The champion has a name. It's Charles do Bronx Oliveira. Arman Sarukian, on the other hand, now. 21-3 as a professional, 8-2 in the UFC, an impressive record on his own right. 9-1 when it comes to KO TKOs, 4 wins by KO TKO in the UFC, 5 wins by submission, 7-2 when it comes to decisions, 4 of those 7 decision victories, and 2 of the decision losses taking place in the UFC. He is a rising star. He is the next generation and next class of fighter. I mean that more of in an age sense than I do in a style sense. He's just the younger class coming up, man. Eventually it will just be Arman Sarukian's time. Straight up. And there won't be anything that we can do. I've backed Arman Tsarukyan in his past couple of outings. He looks really good. That's the thing. I will say, though, it's mainly physical, or it comes from physical attributes and less of a technical thing, save the grappling, save the wrestling in particular. I got Charles Oliveira possibly hurting Arman Tsarukyan in a chaotic exchange, close exchange with the hands, and then sinking in a sub brutally and putting an end to Arman Tsarukyan, possibly even putting him to sleep by rear naked choke. What round? I don't know. I want everyone to be prepared, though. Arman Tsarukyan, like I was saying before, extremely gifted athlete, very explosive. A bit rough around the edges, but that's not the worst thing to be. If Charles were to fall, we have to take it in stride. It's tough. Moving on to the lightweight BMF title fight. That is Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. Almost a sad fight. This is like a bittersweet calling, you know. Two legends of the sport going at it in what is almost guaranteed to be a banger fight, potential fight of the night candidate, just on paper. Some dude has to lose. I mean, obviously there could be a draw, but some dude has to lose in a sense, you know. Probably someone will lose. Justin Gaethje coming into this fight at 35 years old, 5'11", 70-inch reach. Max Holloway 3 years younger at 32 years old. 5'11" with a 69-inch reach. I'm going with Justin, the human highlight, the walking highlight, your favorite fighter's favorite fighter, the most violent fighter in the UFC, Gaethje. I'll tell you why. The Justin Gaethje that you've been watching recently is not a normal Justin Gaethje. You may have noticed I've also kind of skipped over the records. I will mention records and some other things in a bit, but with fighters of these, of this profile, of this high profile, the real speculation, conjecture, woo-woo bullshit comes out. Logic out the window. Out the window. The Justin Gaethje that you've seen recently is calculated Justin Gaethje. Now, you may not have known it. It's literally a mythical fucking fighter. I called Justin Gaethje not KOing Dustin Poirier by head kick, but beating Dustin Poirier. Looked phenomenal. Max Holloway has never been finished by KO TKO. I think Justin Gaethje's the man. I think Justin Gaethje's the man to do it. And here's why. No, I don't think that we'll be seeing a lot of static or not necessarily inactive, but spread out 1-2s or lower level combinations from Justin Gaethje. I think we're going to see power and pressure. Okay, and it will result in a catch. If you go fishing, you might catch something. I think Justin Gaethje's going fishing. This isn't the most intricate breakdown I know. I'm actually not being that articulate even with this breakdown, but Justin Gaethje, man, big momentum coming into this fight. His last couple of wins cannot be overstated. He has decent power, real decent power, insane heart and chin. Very skilled wrestler, as we know. And he's actually shown technical improvements in his most recent fights. Hence the mythical status. He's calculated Gaethje. He's legendary in his own right. He's looking the best he ever has, in my opinion. Max Holloway, on the other hand, is a terrifying legend in his own right. And really, some would probably say more of a legend in the sport than Justin, honestly. Max Holloway has a 25-7 record, 21 wins took place in the UFC and 7 losses. Has been fighting in the UFC for most of his career. He's fought the who's who. He's fought anybody and everybody Max Holloway has. 11 of his 25 wins have come by KO TKO. He has never been finished by KO TKO, and 10 of those 11 wins took place in the UFC. He's 2-1 when it comes to submissions. All took place in the UFC. 12-6 when it comes to decisions. 9-6 in the UFC. The former UFC featherweight champion with 2 defenses. Unbelievable heart and chin himself. He's moved up in weight from featherweight. He is the best boxer in the UFC, as self-proclaimed. One thing to note, though, I think this is a big step up in competition, not from Max's career in general, but from his last fight in particular, which was against the Korean Zombie. I think that this is a massive step up. Obviously, just in competitiveness, in form, and activity that Justin Gaethje is compared to the Korean Zombie at the time of their fight. I think Justin's going to come out and surprise a lot of people. A lot of people. I got Justin, man. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening, a very anticipated fight for me, but every fight on this card is anticipated, really, so what am I saying? The Strawweight Women's Championship, just the Strawweight Championship, I should say, the UFC Strawweight Championship, that is Weili Zhang versus Yan Xiaonan. Weili Zhang looking to defend her title against someone that I think is kind of mids. I'm going to say it. Weili Zhang and Yan Xiaonan are both 34 years old. Weili Zhang is 5'4" with a 63-inch reach. Yan Xiaonan is 5'5", and she matches the 63-inch reach. Weili Zhang has a 24-3 record. 8 of those 24 wins and 2 of those 3 losses took place in the UFC. 11 wins and 1 loss by KO TKO. 2-1 in the UFC. 8 wins by submission. She picked up 2 in the UFC. 5-2 when it comes to decisions. She picked up 4 and dropped 1 in the UFC. The reigning and defending UFC Strawweight champion. She realized that title initially, actually, because she's made 2 runs. She's the 2-time, I should say. Back in July 31st of 2019. She held that up until April 24th of 2021. She reclaimed her title back in November 12th of 2022, and she's held it, obviously, up until now, with 1 defense in between that. And she also had 1 defense before as well. One of my favorite fighters, legitimately. One of the best, I think, pound-for-pound women's fighters. Unbelievable bag of techniques. And the techniques are almost immaculate. They're legitimately almost immaculate. Now, sometimes Weili Zhang gets hit a little bit too much for my liking. Almost every fighter has that problem. I think she's a true mixed martial artist, a true warrior. And Yan Xiaonan, while she has picked up, I guess, wins over some names recently, and she has been in the UFC for an extremely long time. She's been in the UFC longer than Weili Zhang has. I think that there's levels. I think that we're going to see levels. She does have power. The power is always a threat. We have seen Weili Zhang, unfortunately, get finished on the feet. Yan Xiaonan is 17-3 coming into this fight, 8-2 in the UFC. 7-1 when it comes to KO TKO, 1-1 in the UFC. The 1 win being over a nobody, pretty much. 1-1 when it comes to subs, not taking place in the UFC. 9-1 when it comes to decisions. 7-1 in the UFC. I personally, like I said, think she's mid. She has that sneaky power. I think that her striking compared to Weili Zhang is simply sloppy. It's sloppy. It's sloppy. I see Weili taking this one. I'm very confident on this one. I honestly wish I could say more, but really, there's nothing more to say. I think just the eye test speaks for itself. I think Weili Zhang takes this fight. By KO TKO. Possibly. If not, very dominant decision. And to the main event. This is where I will present to you my last segment constructed, or I should say edited, remixed for your viewing pleasure. Talking about picks. Any way you cut it, MMA Guru's picks are falling off.
Right on.
Cole, I remember when you first started making picks, telling us how much you admired the bastard.
I was wrong. Wrong. You ain't never been right. About nothing. And dig this, you assholes, and dig it good.
Guru's been making picks for 5 years, and he's still going.
That mean anything to you, huh?
Guru ain't meant to fall off. The only thing that can kill Guru is Guru. Talking about picking.
Y'all experts.
You all know about picking?
Well, I'd like to hear about it, potheads. You smoke this shit so to escape from reality?
Yeah, I don't need this shit. I am reality.
Y'all experts on the subject, talking about picks. I'm going with Alex Poton Pereira. Pereira. I didn't know how to hit that accent and pronounce his name, but Alex Poton Pereira versus Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship that Alex himself is defending. Get hyped, man. It's funny. I remember when this fight was first announced, people were kind of disappointed. I think it's fair to say disappointed. They were expecting a more grandiose headlining event for UFC 300, and I think that's very fair. I think a lot of us were expecting Conor or maybe something of that caliber. I think people have realized now this is a very exciting fight. This is a very good fight. It's deserving of, honestly, this placement. I think it will pay off. I got Alex Pereira, man. Jamal Hill is a dangerous fighter, and he's deceptively good, I would say, just overall. He's proved me wrong before. You can see he's had a steady climb up the ranks, up in levels of competition, in name, all that. Alex Poton Pereira, though, I think that this is going to be a striking match, and he is the better striker. Straight up. Alex is coming into this fight with a 9-2 record, 6 of those 9 wins and 1 loss coming in the UFC. He's 36 years old, stands 6'4" with 80-inch reach. Jamal has a 12-1 record, 6-1 in the UFC, as well as 1 no contest. He's 32 years old, stands 6'4", and has 1 inch shorter reach at 79 inches. Both men have 7 wins and 1 loss by KO TKO. Both men have 4 of their 7 wins and their 1 KO TKO loss taking place in the UFC. However, Jamal Hill also got picked up a KO TKO on the Contender Series to get in the UFC as well. Jamal Hill has no submissions on his record and only 5 decision victories. None of them took place in the UFC. Alex Pereira, on the other hand, has 1 loss by submission and 2 decision victories that took place in the UFC. He was kind of groomed, put on the fast track, but it's paid off. He's passed the test. All tests that were thrown at Alex Poton Pereira, he's passed, man. Hands of stone, literally, deadly and unorthodox striker. Unnatural power specifically with the hooks. He is the reigning and defending UFC light heavyweight champion. He has like a secret leg kick technique. He was also the former UFC middleweight champion from November 12th, 2022 to April the 8th of 2023 against his rival where the belts were exchanged multiple times. Jamal Hill, on the other hand, he does have scary power. He's deceptively good. He has that kind of wild spirit to fight, to bang, and that you kind of need that. He's beaten very tough fighters. This is the biggest test of his career, and it is a hard test. Ultimately, I see Alex winning this way more than I see Jamal winning this. If Jamal wins, he'll be known as Chamal. Like Chamal. Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill. That will be a new legendary fighter in and of himself, Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill. And you heard it here, Jamal. I will recap all of the picks one last time, and then maybe, I think actually there's a little bit of talking to do left. Starting off the card, again, I had Cody Garbrandt. Gun to my head, KO TKO. Late round 1, maybe mid round 2 if not. Actually, early round 2. Scratch mid. Early round 2 if not. Moving on, we got Jim Miller. I think Jim Miller finishes Bobby Green. I don't really see how he finishes him, but I do see the finish there, whether it be on the feet. Bobby Green's chin just does not hold up, or he's able to get a hold of him literally and bring him to the ground and get that sub. Marina Rodriguez. Who knows? Maybe she finishes Jessica Andrade. I just got Marina Rodriguez. Renato Moicano, I got by submission in round number 2. Maybe Renato isn't able to get Jalen Turner down to the ground in round number 1. Maybe he gets him down all the way at the end, but they're able to survive. The round ends on the ground, and maybe Renato actually takes the worst of it on the feet in the first round. I think in round 2, though, he's able to get it down onto the ground much quicker. If that's the case, and he gets it done. He finds that sub. Moving on, I got Diego Lopes. Diego Lopes. How? I'd like to say KO TKO. I think he wants to get a KO. I could see Sadiq Youssef getting hurt really bad, and then it leads to a submission. He just submits him instead. But either way, I got Diego. Kayla Harrison, I could see her winning by KO TKO in round 1 via ground and pound. She takes down Holly Holm and just beats her head in. I could see that happening. Maybe submits her. Aljamain Sterling, I got by submission. I do think that he'll find the back. I think that he'll finish this fight rather than let it go to decision. But Aljamain Sterling, he pumps out decisions, so we don't know. Moving on, I got Yuri Prohaska by KO TKO. Round, I don't know, but I want to say 1. I don't see it. I'm going to pray that Yuri just comes in bat out of hell to violate. Okay. Then I got Bo Nickel. The big switch after that followed up. I'm not going with Arman Sarukian. But that might be absolutely foolish. Just wrong. You'll have to be the judge. Moving on to Justin Gaethje, I got winning. I know I was alluding to him maybe being the first man to finish Max Holloway on the feet. And I'll fucking ride with it by KO TKO. Not 100% confident, but that's just all of the method of victory and rounds are cherries on top for me, honestly. I just care about the money line pick, for real. Co-main event, I got Weili Zhang winning by, if not an extremely strong decision, a KO TKO. Finishing off with Alex Pereira, KO TKO round 2. You know the vibes. You know the vibes. Those are all the picks. UFC 300 is finally upon us, my brothers. It's so exciting, man. Like, I am very desensitized in this sport. I've seen a lot of shit, but I still get excited for pay-per-views and even fight nights. If the fight night is decent, I will be excited for it. I'm looking forward to it the entire week. You know, maybe that's a testament to my fucking sad existence, but I look forward to the fights every week. But with UFC 300, I feel like it didn't seem, at least to me personally for a long time, that it had the vibe, the aura of it being a major milestone event. But I think that feeling is really settling in. I feel it, at least. It does feel like an important event. I'm very excited for it. I'm a bit anxious with some of the picks. I know I made some wild picks. Cody Garbrandt, crazy pick. I do wish that I was the only one that made that. Not the only one that made that pick. I can't say that like that, but like, I had that pick, and then I saw that MMA Guru hit that pick, and I was like, God damn it, man. And his whole shtick was fucking hilarious. Hats off to you if you're watching this, my brother. Again, he's the reason why I started making these pick videos. But neither here nor there. I digress. Just a little bit of ranting. I'm very excited for this event. Gonna have all my boys come through, smoke major gas. Might be going down to the dispensary to get some crazy shit. You can expect spooky hours, smoky hours. It will be both spooky hours and smoky hours on Saturday into Sunday. Straight up. More than 24 hours of spooky hours and smoky hours. Ah, man. I think these fights will be great, man. Who knows how the picks will do. I might fucking get a clean sweep. I might get every pick wrong, which would be as equally as impressive as getting the clean sweep, I want to remind you. I really hope that you enjoyed the movie clips, the editing little bits, anything that I did in the little segments, that if it made you laugh, made you smile, if you just appreciated it and were entertained in the slightest for a moment, I'm very glad. That's all I wanted from that. Can you expect stuff like that in the pick videos to come? I had said before, yeah, kind of, but it's only yeah, kind of. For big events like big pay-per-views or fight nights that I'm particularly interested in, I will try to make the effort to place more of those edits in. I also will be having more time as this semester comes to a close, and I will be going on my spring break very soon, where I will have more time to actually produce these videos and put more effort into the production of said videos. But once in a while, you will be able to expect that. As for new content, the book review that I was mentioning, it will be kind of a double-header book review. Not really. There's only going to be one book that I'm mainly going to be focusing on. I did finish another book before that. These books are, and when I say I finished them, I'm finishing these books for pleasure. I'm not finishing them for school, for an assignment, or anything like that. I'm just reading them. the book that I had finished prior to the book that I'm reading now was Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. I'd never read Breakfast at Tiffany's. Vastly different from the movie. I think a lot of the language used may surprise some people that maybe really wouldn't be expecting it at all. That just didn't really think about like the time or like what was going on. A bit of a bizarre novel, honestly. It was a bit tweaky at times. Also, like I was high as hell when I finished Breakfast at Tiffany's, and the addition of the book that I had, I don't know if maybe every Breakfast at Tiffany's is like this, but it had like 2 other short stories, I'm sure, by Truman Capote, but I thought, like, I was smacked, and I thought it was the protagonist it was his stories. I thought it was his stories that he wrote. And they were put in as an excerpt into the book, because one of them fit very well. Maybe they were, and I literally missed that, but that was good. I enjoyed it. You know, it's a small book. Not the best I've ever read, but it was enjoyable enough. I did want to keep reading. I wanted to see what happened, you know, all that good stuff. Bit of an abrupt ending, you could say, if that was the true ending and there wasn't, and those short stories are actually just separate short stories published in that book. The book I'm reading right now, which I'm close to finishing, one of the most brilliant books I've ever read, completely blown me away at every turn. A Confederacy of Dunces. Absolutely amazing book. Absolutely amazing book, man. I will talk. I'm not going to say anything more about that. I'm going to talk more about that in its own video because it really deserves its own video. Absolutely love that book. You can't expect to see book reviews as kind of new content, a new content thing. More so as long as I keep reading, really, I should say. Maybe even movie reviews, who knows. But speaking of movie reviews, there is a form of content adjacent to that I'm hoping will be on the channel soon enough. It depends on me, but I'm hoping it will be on the channel soon enough. I think that's it. I'll let you go. Please, thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for giving me your time, your viewership, as always. If you liked the video, please leave a like. It means a lot to me. If you dislike the video, please dislike the video. And let me know why in the comments. Any questions, concerns, and literal comments, please leave them down below. I will get back to you 100%, probably in a speedy manner, honestly. I respond. We'll talk as long as the conversation goes organically, honestly. Like, really, any questions on my picks, I'd love to know your picks. Subscribe if you'd like to see more. It would mean the world to me if you do. Speaking of, big shout out to this dude, Jay
Crazy Jim Heath. I just remembered the J.
Appreciated
Sorry
your message,
about that.
brother, on my most recent Smoky Hours recap video. Thank you for watching. I hope you're watching this one. I hope you made it this far. That's a little personal shout out for you. If you want a little personal shout out, just let me know that you're here to watch. Let me know that you're joining the crew. You're joining the audience. You're tuning into the channel. Really, that's all I ask for. As always, much love. Big kiss.